Good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to see everyone. Let's learn a little bit of Torah here together. So we are learning the topic of Bar and Bat Mitzva today. And we're going through this a little bit in detail. We've all done this in one way or another, so we all, in a certain way, get to know this or be acquainted with this, but we don't really always put some thought into how this really works precisely. So this is a little bit of a background on this. Some of the ideas are well known. Some of the ideas are lesser well known as to how this operates. And Be'ezras Hashem, the next time we have the opportunity of celebrating, we will have the opportunity of doing this with a more profound perspective. So let's start at the very beginning. First of all, a special thank you to Stern, who's sponsoring this entire series. Be'ezras Hashem. Let us learn.
Thank you.
So the question is so how do we know this is a thing? How do we know that a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah is a thing? Where does this even come from? Do we we know we celebrate a bar mitzvah, we know we celebrate a bat mitzvah, but where does that even come from? So before we even get there, what does the word bar or bat mitzvah literally mean? What is it actually the translation of the word? A bar is not the alcohol. A bar, in fact, is the Aramaic translation of the word ben. So it's a ben mitzvah and a bas mitzvah. Somebody becomes under a mitzvah, so to speak. They are a child of, they are now wearing or carrying the mitzvahs in a certain sense, which means that they're obligated. So the question then becomes, okay, so how do we see that? Where are the Jewish sources that this really matters? So we know it's the case, but where do we know this even from? So there's a number of places, I'm sure we're all very familiar. Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, Ben Chamesh Lemikra, a child at the age of 5 should start learning Chumash. That's that we do it around first grade, so that's around there. Ben Esther Lemishnah, that at the age of 10 is for learning Mishnayos, and Ben Shlosh Esrei Lemitzvahs, and 13 is for mitzvahs, referring to a boy, of course. So the Mishnah takes us as for granted that a child at the age of 13 is reaching that stage. And there's many rabbinic texts which relate to this. So for instance, it says in Parashas Toldos, Vayigdalu hana arim. The boys grew, or the lads grew older. What does it mean? Who's it referring to, first of all? Yaakov and Esav, the twins. So what does that mean? The Midrash actually says, Rabbi Levi Omar, Mashal lahadas v'atzbunit, shoyu gedalim ze al gabe ze. So we're talking about a myrtle and some sort of thorn bush that are intermingling with each other. They grow next to each other. Once they reach the stages of blossoming, they reach the stages of maturity. This one produces a beautiful smell like the myrtle does, and this one produces its thorns. Meaning to say, it's the stage when you see the true nature, the true character of that entity. And therefore, it goes and says, Kach kol yud gimel shana shnehem holchin lebeis hasefer shneim boim lebeis hasefer lachar yud gimel shana zeh alech lebate midrashos v'zeh alech lebate avodas kochavim. Up till now, they're getting on the same school bus. Yaakov and Esav are going through the same school system, same teachers. Once they reach maturity, that is the time when now suddenly their true nature is now being displayed as a whole. And the Midrash goes on further to say, Amar Rebbe Lazar, from here we see, Tzarech Adam litapel bivnoi ad yud gimel shana mikan va'elach tzarech sheyomer baruch shepotrani mi'onsho shel zeh. You've got to invest as much effort as you can before the age of 13 with your son, and then afterwards you've got to say, Blessed be Hashem who allowed me to be exempt of the punishment of this, which means to say the most formative time in the character formation of a child is up to the age of 13. Afterwards, in a certain sense, we lose control to a certain degree. Obviously, we're involved and we put on limits and we give support and all those things. But in terms of this is when their true character emerges as well. Actually, just over Shabbos, Shalom said to me, once your girls reach the age of teenagehood, you hide under the table for 4 years, and then everything comes back and it all works out later on. Baruch Hashem. There needs to be a lot of work beforehand if you want to make sure that's going to happen, and it is a special opportunity. So we see it's the case, but then the question is so why? Did the Torah arbitrarily, meaning it's clear, it's replete in rabbinic traditions. The question is this an arbitrary decision as to why this should be? And the truth is that not at all. the Mishnah in Maseches Nida describes the difference between young men and young women, and it's describing in terms of Nadarim. So the Mishnah says, Bas achas esrei shana v'yom echad nedaria nivdakin. When a girl turns 11, at that point in time, we analyze her vows, meaning to say we start taking seriously things she says, because she now has the maturity to make decisions, and she can make restrictive decisions about her own life. She can start saying things which have impact in her own life. And we know that there's a certain degree of veto right a father may have over her Nadarim, but she needs to know what she means first. But bas 12 shana v'yom echad nedaria kayamim, at 12 years and 1 day, her Nadarim are extant. Uboidkim kol shtei, and she will be and you examine her through the 12th year. And a similar thing with her boy, but it's at 12 years old you start checking his Nadarim, and at 13 is when they are kayamim. The Gemara goes on to explain that this relates to, in fact, puberty. This relates to puberty, which means to say that physiologically, a girl at the age of 12 will start developing signs of puberty. The Gemara, the ones that the stage of the Gemara focuses on is pubic hair, as an example, as a description, and the boys will develop that later. It's interesting. Technically speaking, the age of start of puberty, depending on how you measure it, is a range of years. And for girls, it is between 8 and 13, and for boys, it's between 9.5 or 9 and 14. So boys are slower, later bloomers in general, which is reflected in the later year as well. Now, in the Reform movement today, it's all very much egalitarian. It's like Bar And Bat Mitzva is 13, so why should the girls be different? But the truth is whenever you try to even the playing fields to make sure that everybody feels happy, you're ignoring, in this case, a physiological reality, which is that girls reach puberty and therefore maturity earlier than boys do, and that's celebrated in the framework of halacha as well. So then the question is, so why should that matter as well? Right, so what's the point of that? So the Gemara actually describes. You say, how does Torah and halacha relate to a physiological reality? Like, what's the relationship between those two stages? So the Gemara in the same area on Daf Mem Vav Aleph tells us, the bottom page 2. Take a look at this. The Gemara says, Ish kiyav lindor neder ma tamud leima. Why does it tell us that a man makes a neder? That when a child or a boy who's just turned 13 years old will make a vow, at the age of 13 the vow is relevant, the vow is extant, even if he doesn't fully understand it. So the Gemara says, what case are we dealing with on the top of page 3? If the child has not started producing pubic hairs, that was they are not physiologically at the stage of puberty, then we consider that child to be a minor. Elad love the icy saros. No, it must be that they already physiologically reaches the stage of puberty. The time of the ben yud gimel sham yom echad hu dahavalei ish. Ha toich zman klifnei zman. Meaning, if the child will produce signs of puberty before the age of 13 for a boy, that's irrelevant, right? We say that's klifnei zman. But once a child has the stages of puberty and reaches 13, then at that point in time we consider the child to be of age. So then it sounds like, from the way the Gemara is framing it, is there's two moving pieces here. There is actually the physiological development, and there is, we'll call this the age of 13. How do we relate to the two of them? Where was 13 picked then in that case? So this is talked about in the early Rishonim and the Rosh as one example, and the Maharil similarly says that the age of 13 is what's called a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's not something which the rabbis derived, assumed, did an average under the bell curve. What it is that Moshe Rabbeinu at Sinai received the tradition from Hashem that boys at 13, girls at 12. You may argue that Hashem is giving us an average, but that's not our department of trying to figure that out. Yes, doesn't match up with physiological, we'll call it development of a child into the age of maturity. It may. But the point is that this is what the Torah told us, gave us as a oral tradition as to when the child becomes the right age. What was that?
Why did Abraham pick 13 for you small?
He didn't. That was when God told him to give him bris milah. Meaning to say, in that case, it wasn't that Hashem says there's time for a bar mitzvah party, let's go get the DJ. What Hashem said, you need to circumcise you, and the reason why Avram Avinu was circumcised at that time was because he was about to be blessed with a child. So therefore, he got this bris milah. Happened to be that Yishmael happened to be 13 at the time. That was because of Yilid Beisai, right? Those all the people under his umbrella. Yeah, that was not the.
Actually, there is a medrash that by Yoim Gamel doesn't just go on bris or weaning; it goes on bar mitzvah.
First, that's by Yitzchak.
That's by Yitzchak.
Not by Yishmael, yeah.
Right, but Abraham makes a party. Though.
So there you go. Yeah, so
that's the first bar mitzvah party. I don't know if you
very interesting. Very interesting. Now, so
one source.
That is an interesting thing. So yes, by Yishmael not. It is interesting that in the Arab tradition, 13 has sort of retained that importance in a certain sense of the age of maturity as well, and that's from the way they read or misread the end of Parshas Lech Lecha as well.
This Rosh that that's quoting now, it seems there's a lani bechlal shiurim, so it's the same thing like a shir kazayis kepeya, also godless. That's what the Rosh used to say.
Correct. So what I mean to say is that there are certain things where, like, why should it be that we'll call the default measurement of eating in halacha is a kazayis, right? Why is it that that arba al arba amos is the size of a house in terms of, let's say, the chiyuv of mezuzah? There's certainly what's called shiurim, the Gemara lists in Sukkah Daf Dalet, where it describes this is the way that we. So those are what's assumed to be as halacha l'moshe misina. They make sense, meaning to say you need a space, 50 square feet, in order to be able to live, right? To be able to put a bed there at the very least, and that's what requires the mezuzah. But in the end of the day, right, that's all conjecture. The reason we do it is because it's halacha l'moshe misina, which is why there is no dispute. They dispute as to what the shir, like what an amma is, but not the fact that arba amas is the shir. And similarly, where he puts in the same category of bar and bat mitzvah, that's what we received as well. If that's the case, then according to the Rosh, it seems that the most important thing really is the age, right? There are others who say similarly, like the Ma'arit in his responses says, is that really puberty is not really we'll call it the arrival at puberty. The physiological development of a young boy and a young girl is an indicator that they have arrived of age. Meaning to say, what's the predominant factor is age, right? Is the Torah tells us 13 or 12, and happens to be, you will also notice that their bodies will start changing around that time, right? But the main point is what we were told. Meaning to say, this is when it's relevant. That's what he calls a siman rather than a sibba, right? It is a indicator that something's happening when you see the child developing. But the Torah really says this is the age of maturity, this is the age of responsibility, this is the age where things have reached the point of, we'll call it, independence as well. The way that the Gemara frames it, these are all different ways of looking at the same, trying to balance the same idea. Their development and the responsibility. The way the Gemara describes it is what's called, without going through all the details on page 4, is what's called chazaka de Rava. The way Rava, one of the mid-generation Amoraim, understands it, is really it's actually the top of page 5, without going through the entire Gemara. He says, Elo la'achar perek lama li bedika. Why do you need, after the stage of 13, to do a bedika, which is to do or in this case a girl, to do an examination to see has she reached the stage of purity. So the Rava explains that generally speaking, you don't need to check if a child is pubescent, right? You don't need to see, is this child in fact developing as they should? Now, these days, everybody goes to the pediatrician, every year on their birthday, and the pediatrician says, very good, or you should be doing a little more, right? So you don't need to do that, according to Rava, under normal circumstances, because it's what's called a chazaka. A chazaka means an assumption in the place of having to check reality. So that means to say that really 13 and 12 is the age of development, is the age of responsibility, manhood, womanhood. And it happens to be that we assume at that stage that by that time the child is developing physiologically to reflect that entrance into adolescence. That seems to be the way that we paskin in halacha, because the Shulchan Aruch says, in fact, when it comes to this, in the halachas of Kriyas Shema, on page 5, If a child does not start developing signs of puberty, which is reflected in pubic hairs, that the Geshorah says that really you need to have actually physiological development. The Ramah, Ashkenazim Paskin, we don't start making children go to pediatricians and have examinations. We assume that the age of 12 and 13, the child is in what called the stage of puberty, and therefore they would be considered adults. The Mishnah Berurah, when discussing this, says yes, but, which means to say, when it comes to the halachas that the Shulchan Aruch is referring to over here, which is in the halachas of tefillah, right, in Siman Nun Hay and Orach Chaim, that's all right to make that assumption, what's called chazaka derava. But there are times where you can't make the chazaka derava. You can't assume that the child is in fact an adolescent. And that is when it comes to something which is not a din d'Rabbanan like tefillah, but when there's a din d'Oraisa, which is why the custom has developed, and this is always a very sticky question, but that's why it's always important to articulate it, is around Parshas Zachar or Parshas Para, which may be a requirement mid'oraisa to read. So everybody has to listen, and everybody comes to shul for Parshas Zachar. So you really, if you have a bar mitzvah, that Shabbos, it shouldn't be the bar mitzvah boy who's reading that. Complicated, and a little delicate situation. Because the option is you say you could go to the pediatrician, right? And then we don't have to rely on an assumption, right? We can assume that the child has reached puberty, but that's it's not usually a very comfortable conversation. But it is worthwhile knowing, and it's to appreciate that generally speaking, we assume a child is a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah l'kol davar. When it comes to a boy and is doing the learning of the Torah, if it's a chiyuv d'oraisa, that a particular Shabbos, one has to be a little more sensitive to the way this is done as well. And this relates to the balance between the higia shenosav, the idea of arriving at the years, and that relationship to the actual signs of puberty. Is it a siman? Is it a sibba? Is it a reason, or is it simply an indicator? How do the two relate to each other? And it seems that we assume we take it as an assumption that the two work in tandem, unless the stakes are higher. That's what it sounds like is the way that we do things as well. So it's this funny balance between the way we have to regulate society, right? Because you can't have a situation in which every child is treated differently, right? That doesn't work. On the other hand, there has to be some sort of general, we'll call, way that it works, and at the same time, there are unique circumstances for each child as well. We assume for most matters 12 or 13, that's it, we're done and we're good and everything is fine. Now, you say, okay, all this would have been so much simpler if the Torah just said this, right? So the Torah should have just explicated this and said, okay, listen here. So when this whole business, all these 613 commandments, this all comes into play when the boy is 13, when the girl's 12, it would have made things so much easier. I mean, that's like the ABCs, right? Because there's this whole program, it's called Torah and Torah mitzvahs and chukim mishpatim and all this business. So explain to us, tell us. This is how it starts. It seems like a flawed perspective to tell us everything, but not know when it starts or finishes. Right? If you were to read the Torah from start to finish, Bereshis bara to Leinei Kol Yisrael, you would assume that the Torah is incumbent upon every individual from the day they're born. Right? There's no indicator otherwise that a child is not. Now there is the notion of counting when it comes to army, Kol Yotzei Tzava in Parshas Bamidbar. So we do know the notion of 20 years old and that making a difference. But you could say that was just called for conscription, because physically they're going to be involved. But there's no other indicator explicitly in the Torah. So why doesn't the Torah just say that? Say, this is the day and this is how you celebrate. And so there's a beautiful Chasam Sofer in the Torah who makes the observation. He says that it's not just that day is missing. There's another day in the Jewish calendar which is also missing, and that's called Shavuos. There's Zman Matan Torah Seinu. If you read the entire Torah from the beginning till the end, there's never an indicator that Shavuos is the time of Matan Torah. Yes, Shavuos is the festival of Zman HaBikurim, of the first fruits, and the Korbanos which are brought, the Shtei HaLechem, and it's the end and the culmination of the cycle of the 49 days, but there's no indicator in the Torah that this was the day of Matan Torah. We have to go and do the work, we have to do the cheshbon, and we say, okay, well, 49 days, then Moshe Rabbeinu goes up, and there's this 3-day gap, and then there's, and it's the Rosh Chodesh Sivan, and And then we do this whole thing, we're like, oh, look at that. It's the same holiday, which is why, like a lot of, sort of in the resurgence of the Chalutzim, when the secular Jews came back to the land of Israel, how do they celebrate Shavuot? These are like farm parades. They brought out their tractors and they brought all the produce in the back and they drove them through and they made a whole spring festival. That was how it was celebrated. Why? Because they looked in the Bible and that's all the Bible says, right? It doesn't talk about anything to do with Torah. So why is that not discussed? And there are a lot of reasons as to this, but the Chasam Sofer says a very simple reason, and that is the day of Matan Torah was the day that we received the responsibility of being Jews. We were no longer just a nation; we became now officially in the program. And if that's the case, the Torah can't tell us that today is a day to celebrate, because that should be an automatic outcome of being part of the system. Meaning, it's kind of like the teacher says, okay, folks, now you're in 8th grade, now you're in 9th grade. This is a big day, so we're going to mandate that you celebrate that you're now reached high school. It's like nobody's going to celebrate because they're told to. Nobody's going to act differently because they're told to. No, that's the outcome of arrival. So the Torah de-emphasizes Matan Torah as Shavuot as being Matan Torah, because when we receive the Torah, that should automatically be the time of celebration. In the same way, says this Chasam Sofer V'chein b'yom Bar Mitzva. On the day of a Bar Mitzvah, the Torah is not going to emphasize that this is the day of a Bar Mitzvah, because the Torah wants it to be that automatically when you enter the stage. Yes, in the rabbinic tradition, we're going to know what it is. Now, we're going to know this is the right time. The Torah's not going to say, okay, today's the day to celebrate, today's a big milestone, because then, in a certain sense, it's mandating what should be an obvious reaction. The other way of saying this slightly differently is every day is Matan Torah. Really means to say, if you only celebrate Torah on one day of your national existence or one day of your adult life, then it becomes the end point of that existence too. I remember I was discussing, I was at a Shiva house once, and I met the youth director of Temple Bethel down the road. And he was the youth director there 30 years ago. So I said, tell me how it was. Like, what was the deal? So he said, there were 1,200 families, just to give you a sense of it. 1,200 families. That's 3 times the size of our shul. Okay, just to understand in terms of the scope. And that was only 30 years ago. I said, so what was the deal? Like, how did this work? So he says, well, the thing is, I really worked with Bar And Bat Mitzva girls, because that was like the stage where you had them, because they had to come to lessons and so on. So, but the truth is, after that, they were gone. That was their bar. Literally the bar they had to get under, and after that they were gone. There was no more interest, no more. So that's what the problem is. If you make too much of a deal educationally of a day, then you essentially you de-emphasize afterwards, right? What the Torah is trying to say is that this is not about a day, this is about a lifestyle, right? And so the lifestyle begins now, but don't overemphasize that day, because education you're going to lose everybody afterwards, and that's what happened, right? They can barely get a minyan now. It's a terrible tragedy. It's not like they went to greener pastures for those kids. It wasn't like they found another shul for the large point. They found other interests in life other than Judaism. So if you think about that, that's a little bit of that educational balance in terms of how to do this, and that relates to the way we also celebrate this as well. A lot of emphasis. Bar And Bat Mitzva should make a big deal of it, but a big deal of the beginning of the process, not the day itself. The
Sefer is very beautiful. The Gemara in Pesachim, Hakol Moedim Batzeres Bin Alachem. That on Shavuos you make a party. Based on this, it's beautiful. Beautiful. It's an automatic algorithm. If I've got the Torah, I have to do.
Beautiful. Lachem, there needs exactly.
Another shot in that Gemara.
Beautiful. Right. So it all comes together. Just a very interesting point. Education is. This is also, you see things like this where. I'll just like as a parallel perspective, where the Torah does not spend so much time focusing on Olam Haba. The Torah doesn't say quid pro quo. You do X here and you get Y there. The Torah doesn't say that. The Torah solves all its problems within the framework of this world, which is a very strange way of doing this. One way of explaining that, of many, is that the Torah educationally is de-emphasizing working for rewards. Right? So the Torah is not saying that there isn't reward, but it doesn't want to generate a group of people who are going to be these, we'll call it spiritual hedonists. Keep just putting money into the slot machine because everybody is a means to their ends, which is their personal portfolio that they're going to be claiming at the end of the day. It's the same kind of idea where there are important values in the Torah, but the Torah doesn't, so to speak, put in the front and center, because it doesn't want us to be acting based on that being the guiding principle, which is a very fascinating perspective. So what are we supposed to do on this day? So with the boys, it's a little easier because there's a few things. Like the Divrei Malkiel says, it's a day of celebration for a simple reason, 2 reasons. He says, number one is that the parents are now let off the hook. You know what I mean? To say that spiritually speaking, the parents no longer have the full responsibility of this child. Now, let's be clear about this before we go further. Parents never get off the hook, right? Not financially, not in terms of being vulnerable, but in terms of sort of spiritual responsibility. I'll just tell you a scary thing. I've just always think about this, is that when David HaMelech had terrible things happening in his life, and Hashem told him it was going to happen because of his sin with Bathsheba, that Ra is going to come up from his own house, and David HaMelech prayed. It was a terror, and he suffered terribly through the rest of his life. One of the things he suffered with was that his son Avshalom rebelled against him. Avshalom took over his household, took over Yerushalayim. David HaMelech receded, and then David HaMelech was put in this very difficult place where he didn't want to harm Avshalom, yet at the same time he needed to depose of Avshalom. So he sends Yoav and he says, please don't kill him. But Avshalom had these beautiful long locks, these long hair. That was one of the reasons he kind of thought a little too much of himself. And when he was riding into battle, he got caught in a tree because his hair got caught in the tree, and he was hanging there. And Yoav, disobeying David, killed his son Avshalom at that time. Now, Yoav was doing what was best for David, because as long as Avshalom was in the picture, David HaMelech wasn't going to come back to Yerushalayim. But David HaMelech was caught in this bind as a father, where he didn't want his son to die, but he didn't want him to harm him. And when David HaMelech hears about this, he calls out this most bitter call. He says, Avshalom beni, Avshalom beni, and he calls out 7 times. He cries for his son, in his son's name, even though his son was trying to kill him. And the Rashi quotes the Medrash that he pulled him out of this Shiva Madura Gehinnom by calling out those 7 times as he wept for his son's death. By the way, you can go visit his kever, right? Yad Avshalom is out in the Kidron Valley. So as you got the Shara Ashpot, you wouldn't go there right now, right? Okay, well, we like to say it. Okay, so anyway, there is what's called Yad Avshalom, where Avshalom is purportedly buried, and Michael has pointed out this archaeologically, or it might not be exactly the spot, but nonetheless, the grave or the tomb, so to speak, of the crypt of Avshalom is found. There's two large, we call it building structures, at the bottom of the valley. That you can see that right from the you call it outside the Kotel. One is Yad Zechariah, and one is the Zechariah HaKohen. Another one is Avshalom, at least so it's called. You can visit them. And be it as it may, the question becomes so how does that work exactly? Like in Judaism as opposed to Christianity, we don't believe about one person taking another person out of the netherworlds. It doesn't work like that. Judaism doesn't believe in one person, taking away other people's sins. That's a Christian kind of belief. So that doesn't mean David HaMelech is taking them out. You just cry about somebody and take away their all their problems. It doesn't work like that. So a friend of mine, Rabbi Menachem Rosenbaum, said no. David HaMelech wasn't taking him out. David HaMelech was calling out because he realized he created Avshalom. Right? If you look through the life of Avshalom was the son of his 4th wife, and David HaMelech, in a certain sense, always pushed him down. David HaMelech, because there was the whole episode of Amnon and Tamar, and Avshalom, there's Amnon being killed, and then Avshalom going away, and David HaMelech pushing him back and wouldn't speak to him because of this the terrible trial between the brothers. Avshalom's sister Tamar, right? So was raped by Amnon, another brother, and Avshalom went and killed the brother, and David didn't want him to kill him, and then he stonewalled him for having killed him because he was trying to educationally work this out. And David HaMelech never gave him the attention he really deserved, but he was a complicated character. In a certain sense, David HaMelech was saying, Avshalom bini, Avshalom, I created the circumstances in which you suffered so much that you became this child who rebelled against me. David HaMelech wasn't talking about Avshalom did. He talking about what he did as a dad.
He's davening for himself.
He was and that's the Shiva Madriga is the framework he created to create an Avshalom. And that's a very terrifying thought, because in a certain sense that goes beyond Bar Mitzvah. So as a parent, we never really get out of this thing, right? We never really escape. But to a certain degree, the personal responsibility now shifts from the parent to the child. But having said that, that's one aspect of celebration. But if you think about it, that's the celebration of the parents. It's like, sure, but when it comes to the child, the celebration is that they're now obligated in mitzvahs. Now what they're doing is no longer chinuch. So when they're shaking their lulav and esrog, it's not as a function of the Torah said that you should be educated to do this. No, you're doing it because when the Torah says it doesn't refer to your parent trying to teach you. It's referring to you. Now you are the subject of the Torah. That's an amazing stage as well. The Gemara describes Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef was a sagi nahar, which is could not see. He was not able to see, and it describes that he had different stages of understanding his own, so to speak, obligation in Torah. At the beginning, he heard the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said that a summa is patur min mitzvahs, that a blind person is not obligated in mitzvahs. And when he heard that, he lived his life as such. He wasn't obligated to do mitzvahs. He could opt in, and he opted in many times, but he was not obligated. Then he came to the realization that maybe a summa is not obligated in mitzvahs. And at that point in time, when he heard that the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda was not the predominant view in halacha, he made a large party. Why? Because he says very, very famously, which is the notion of Gadol ha-mitzvah v'oiseh, yoseh mi-misha ein ha-mitzvah v'oiseh. Yes, I was performing the Torah mitzvahs, but I was opting in when I believed that I was exempt from the mitzvahs. Now I'm suddenly obligated, and I'm so much happier to be doing the same things as a person who's obligated. Why? Because a person who's obligated gets much more reward than a person who's not obligated, which always seems funny because you say, the volunteers, we love those volunteers, go volunteers. But ultimately Rabbi Yosef says, no. Volunteering is wonderful, and like everyone should be commended for volunteering. But in the end of the day, you can just say goodbye and good luck. My shift has ended, and I appreciate this. I'm taking a 3-month break. I'm sorry. I hope you guys find everybody else afterwards, right? And that's what happens to volunteers, right? Because they're flaky. They go away when they want. And the Golem Mitzvah means to say, by the fact, nobody likes to be told what to do. Nobody. Like, you know how it is. Especially as your kids get older and you have adult kids and you want them to do something, you make suggestions and you try to explain what might be a nice idea. You don't really say they should do it, but they're going to maybe, one could do things like this. We always try to get other people to do things. It's very hard to get people to do things, especially as they grow into adults. Nobody likes to be told what to do. No one. So when the Torah tells us what to do, we have a natural resistance to the Torah saying, now is the time to do X. Right? Which is why some people are so averse to rabbis. It's like, because they have to tell you what to do sometimes, right? And nobody wants to be told what to do. So Rabbi Yosef says, I am embracing the discomfort of being told what to do, because now when I'm opting into Daven Shachris, I'm not opting in. I'm not a nice volunteer with a pat on the head and a candy at the end. No, I have to do it. And I don't want to get out of bed when it's the early winter and it's dark and it's cold. Don't. But I'm going to, because I'm obligated. And that's worth celebrating. Says the Maharshal in his commentary on the Gemara, the Yam Shel Shloma, he says, yes, that is the reason why we celebrate Bar Mitzvahs and Bat Mitzvahs, because in the end of the day, that's the day where it's no longer a nice thing, it's now a thing. Right? I remember that a minor can lay maftir. You know that? So I started laying in my career started at the age of 11. That was when I did my first maftir. And everybody's like, oh, it's so amazing. Like, whenever you have children doing things, you're like, that's just so nice. Then when you become bar mitzvah, it's like, okay, get into the rotation. Right? So, you know how it works? Right, so like this, tachlis. Right now, okay, so it's like the voice breaks, it's no longer cute, let's go. Right? So that's really what's happening. Rabbi Yosef says is I'm now, and I have to do this. And I have to do this. And that's what bar mitzvah is it's no longer cute. It's no longer nice. It's no longer voluntary. And that's part of what's being celebrated over here as well. So what you want to do on the bar mitzvah? So the Mariel quotes in his halachas that a bar mitzvah boy should read the Torah and say the brachas in the Torah, and the father should say brach shepatrani on sheshel zeh. The minhagim of the city of Worms recounted that on the Shabbos after the bar mitzvah, the young man should also do the tefillah, and specifically there was a tune that he talked about which was sung to Vayazor, V'Yageh, and V'Yoshia, which is the beginning of the Torah reading on Shabbos, and of course he should read the Sefer Torah as well. In the Maseches Smachos, there's a whole discussion as to what kind of things you're allowed to throw or should be throwing for bar mitzvahs and chasanim and kalos, as to when celebrating with them. In those days it was egozim and kliya. These were things which would not be destroyed when they are throwing. Today we pay fine money for all kinds of terrible things that nobody eats except for the children, but we throw them in as part of the celebration as well. Yeah, David.
Why? I mean, not that I'm opposed to it, because obviously I'm in it. But why should a bar mitzvah boy, like, what's the reason that he should read from the Torah? Is it because that just specifically for that week, or that he should learn how to read from the Torah?
That's a good question. So I'll give you everybody's David's number afterwards, because he's the wonderful, wonderful bar mitzvah teacher, and who's now teaching our second son right now as we speak. And they don't say why. They don't say why. But if I were asked, meaning to say, it seems to be that's just part of the responsibility of being a person who's a contributing member of the community, and part of the contributing member of the community is the rotation. It's not that we just outsource to really people who are good, who are great ballet kriya, whom we have wonderful ballet kriya in the shul, but you're supposed to be part of this, and this is a way of entering that as well. It is worthwhile noting that, especially today, this is not something which everybody can hack, right? So there are boys who just, this is not. I was just speaking to somebody whose son is right there at that stage, and they were like, and they spent like a year trying to convince him to do, the maftir, right? And the Haftorah, right? It's just the Maftir and the Torah. And they're going to make a party, and they finally convinced him, and then they were busy deciding on the monogram for the yarmulkes, and this is where bar mitzvahs are at, and the boy came to his parents and started, with tears in his eyes, and he says, "Mom and Dad, like, who are you doing this for?" So I really just don't. I don't want this. I really don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want the party. I don't want the laning. I don't want the whole thing. And he says, I want to go to Israel, and we'll do some chesed projects, and that's going to be my thing. And that was his thing. And that to him was what really was. And so sometimes we do force a round peg into square holes, and one has to be careful about knowing the child. However, at the same time, this is an important bar. One shouldn't underestimate the importance of what we'll call communal involvement, not just as a cute thing, but as an important thing. Yes, Elliot.
I've heard that in certain communities in Israel, it's the father of the bar mitzvah boy who lanes on.
That's a nice thing and everything, but it's like there's no trick in that. So I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it sounds nice, but in the end of the day, I hear that. It just and it certainly shields the child, but. Yeah, it is less pressure, and we don't want to put make pressure. We don't want to make so much pressure. But at the same time, the truth is, kids rise to the bar we give them as well. So yes, there will be, in individual circumstances, we are very understanding, but we should not underestimate the capacity of our children if we create a framework in which they can do that as well.
We want the kid to get an aliyah, or we want the kid to...
The very least an aliyah. The boy needs to get an aliyah. There's no question. But laning, they should lane if they're able to do that. And we've created a society where everything becomes such a big thing. It's like then you can expect children, but and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but that in general in society things are becoming, effort is becoming less, and why should is more involved as well. I actually happened to have the opportunity of recently I was at a dinner with a woman from a conservative community, very, very wonderful woman, and I said, "What do you do?" She says, "Well, I'm retired now, and my thing is working with Bar And Bat Mitzva girls." So I said, "Well, what do you do?" Like, what I was so interested. So she was saying that what she does is she reaches out. She's not in a rabbinic capacity. She's a member of the community, but she does this herself. And she goes to the schools. She goes to the Hebrew schools on Sundays, in the public schools, and she finds the kids who are having a bar and bat mitzvah that year, and she sits with them and she schmoozes with them, and she's really cool and she's very with it, and she gets sort of under their skin as to what is their interest, like what is it that they're really interested in doing. And she spends months working with them to create a project which will reflect their interest within the framework of Torah. Very interesting. A lot of it today, of course, in a society or in a Jewish society which is devoid of Torah itself. Meaning to say, if children are not really learning Torah, right, and they don't have the basics of understanding Torah, unfortunately, they don't have the tools, or they haven't been given the context, then to a large degree, a lot of the answers to that is some degree of chesed or tzedakah, which is wonderful. Like let that be because the social element of Judaism remains, which is beautiful. But there is more. There's more to it. It's a beautiful thing to be able to sort of connect. So she would spend a year working with these children, and she would ask them things about money and say to the kids, how do you view money? And they would describe that. What is your greatest, thing that you'd like to get at the bar mitzvah? And it's like the boy would say like a Rolex, and she said, like, for what? Like, for what purposes do you want to watch? What are you going to be doing with it that's so important? How much money are you giving from your bar mitzvah gift to tzedakah? 0. Why? What are you going to do with that money that's so important? right? Well, maybe there's something you should be thinking about. And these are very important conversations she has, which are sort of like adult conversations about money itself. And then oftentimes she'll get these children to find a project where it's here or in Israel, and they'll make a campaign and collect for that campaign and do the campaign as well, which is a beautiful thing. There's lots of ways of and not every child is the same. That's the point. Not every kid is the same. There's certain we'll call objective bars, and then there's also some sort of subjective bars which need to be done. And it requires, as with anything in life, the more you invest in it, the more it makes a difference. The less you invest in it, it'll just happen. You'll get through. Like the rest of life, the river will carry on flowing. But there's a lot more to this. When it comes to celebration of goals, it's worthwhile noting in halachic history that there were some poskim who were very against it. They said this is not a thing. We should not make a big thing of this. But it's certainly today. It's certainly today in which we're blessed in society, where girls are being educated, are involved in society, and are usually better than the boys when it comes to many aspects of Torah and understanding. That for sure there should need to be, and for all the same reasons. Now, the public expression of it may not be the bar of reading the Torah, right? That might not be the place it is. But the Bat Mitzvah is a celebration of entering into a life of Torah and mitzvahs, and that should certainly be a celebration. It does not mandate flowers, pink DJs, or anything else. That's all great. That's all the way of celebrating, but this should be a meaningful milestone for both boys and girls as entering into the life and Torah mitzvahs, and we should be focusing and trying to find ways to make this transition a transition of joy, a transition of responsibility, whatever we do. That's what the Yalkut Yosef says very clearly. Rav Moshe was against this 3-day Eish, was more open to this. He believes that the social sanctuary itself is not the appropriate place, but anywhere else is the appropriate place. Very, very important discussion, and something which is reflective of today. But the problem today is the opposite problem. Today, it's toning down. It's like, no, the bat mitzvah should not look like a wedding, right? So we're going in the opposite direction because, in a certain sense, we've emphasized the celebration more than the content of the celebration, which is what it really actually means, not just the color of the shoes, right? So it has to be much more of what are you doing? Like, what is this all about? What are you accomplished? What learning project? What chesed project? And that conversation obviously begins 3 years beforehand. Right? Not 3 months beforehand. What are you going to be learning as a parent, as a grandparent with your children? Rabbi Yossi, just thinking about the Siyam just recently, your grandson, what is it going to be that is going to matter intergenerationally for this child? This is going to be a meaningful project. What projects are you beginning? I remember actually such a powerful thing is Michael Weiss when he made, I think it was David's Bar Mitzvah. So afterwards, Rabbi Storch said to him, so he says, "No, like you did a siyum, you did a siyum for the bar mitzvah. So now what? Like now he's 13, so he's done. We move on to the next one. So Michael made sure to have Rabbi Storch learn once a week with David, and then after Jonathan and Josh and Joshua, and they learned. And Michael didn't outsource it. He sat in the chevrusa with his sons, and you can see that his sons are all b'nei Torah. I'm just saying that it requires that the bar mitzvah is not the end of the process; it's the beginning of the process of learning and continuing. And certainly with the grandchildren as they start coming of age, that's the time. The children, the girls, the boys, time to invest. Now this is a beautiful time to invest and have a meaningful relationship as well. I'd just like to conclude with one perspective, and that is the notion of gadlus itself. What does it mean to be a gadol? And we talk about the stage of being a stage of gadlus, and the one very beautiful observation which is made is that it describes in the stage of gadlus by Moshe Rabbeinu, which we just read a few parashiyos ago. It says, "Vayigdal Moshe Rabbeinu grew up." What does it mean? Vayetze liros b'siv losam, and he went out to see the troubles, the difficulties of his brethren, the rest of the Hebrews. And he was a conflicted character because he had Hebrew blood, but he was brought up in the palace, and things were complicated. He was trying to figure out who he was. But one of the ideas of gadlus, of being a gadol, as the Ramban explains, as the Midrash explains, is empathy as well. Is a more sophisticated sense of empathy. And if you think about it, if you're to plot life as a graph, in terms of time as the bottom axis, as it usually is, and then you plot the top, we'll call it the y-axis, as focus outwards on others as opposed to self, you could plot that graph, whether it's a linear ascent or a logarithmic ascent, where the idea is that a child is born completely selfish, right? And it's very hard. You have to negotiate because kids look after themselves, draw to themselves, are not willing to negotiate. And the process of life is allowing that person to become more open to the fact that they're not the only individual in the world. It's not just holding the toy they want. It's not just being in the front of the line. It's not just getting the gift they want. It's being able to expand their sense of consciousness. And so Vayigdal, part of that growth is not just a accomplishment in a party, but it's also the notion of being is empathy beyond self, and that's part of what it means to be part of the community. Being part of the community is not just a club, it's being more, we'll call it, conscious of our national identity, of there being others as well. And Be'ezrat Hashem, with that we will. If we give our children the ability to be able to live up to that bar, they will float to that. They will float up to that bar if we actually educate, talk about, give experiences which reflect that, take them along when it comes to these kinds of things. It's remarkable how much children will care and want to be part of this process as well. Anyways, a lot to think about. A very important stage of life which requires a lot of thought, investment, and time. Be'ezrat Hashem.